Alex Smalley, one of the PhD students, couldn't make it up. He's got something else on today. So yes, this is about starting to build ourselves as a research community and start to understand how we work in an engaged way and what that means to us. And it struck me, I was talking today to the student who's visiting us, Kaisu, that in a sense what's really important about today is that we are a group of researchers who are, if you like, born digital. Not born digital, born engaged. Born digital is what everybody says. I was talking about born digital and then I suddenly thought, actually we're born engaged. You know, we are a group who are starting out with that in our DNA, in the way we do things. It's just the way we do research around here, rather than something we add on later. And I think that's actually really important. But it does mean that we have to experiment with what that means. And that's what this afternoon is about, start to explore what engaged research means for all of us. So, on your tables, you've got two different colours of post-it notes. I would like you to take one post-it note, choose your colour, and just for a moment, talk on your tables, introduce yourselves, and just on that post-it note, just write down what you, at this moment, think engaged research means. If you're trying to explain it to someone in the pub, what would you say? So introduce yourself, say hello, think what engaged research means. I'm not going to ask you to share your definitions, just write them down and keep them to yourself. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. Amy, you can write it on the chat box for us. I'm not going to share it. I'm just going to say she can write it if she wants to.
We all know this.
Fabulous, that's really good.
I'm at a slight advantage. The onus on you.
I've now learned how to do that though, so I've got a great skill.
Okay, so jot down your, all I'm going to ask you to do is, like when you play Monopoly and you sit on one of the big notes, just pop it to one side, stick it under the table, hide it away from yourself.
Are we done? So there. We didn't even get the top of the pen.
Well, right.
I can't write.
One of the first things I did when I started here, and I've realised that I've missed out one of the most important things, which is to introduce myself. And all of you know that I'm Anne Grand, and I'm the Senior Lead for Engaged Research and Public Engagement in the Centre. Come in, Mama.
You're
still in your seat. One of the first things that was really important for me to do was to start thinking about what engaged research. So we spent some time thinking about that with my colleagues and the Deputy Director for Engaged Research. And we started with the Centre's vision, which of course has been something that had been worked on over a long time by the colleagues, by the PIs who put the Centre together. And those of you who've recently made applications to the Centre will be very familiar with the Centre's vision, which is that we're about transformative research. In a sense, all research should be transformative, otherwise why would you be doing it? But it's about, and also about engaging with diverse partners. And it's about creating and sustaining cultures of health that enable health and well-being across the life course. So from that, we created our centre vision of what engaged research is. And you can find this online. But what we wanted to say very much was it's about multiple ways of engaging. I'm not going to stand here and say, you have to do it this way.
I'm hoping I'm in the right place. Yes, I
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Parting up the hill.
You're lucky you've missed the post-it note.
I'm happy to was very lucky to have her.
I'll ask Pam to touch it. At some stage, I feel we're going to call on Pam's expertise.
That's fine.
That'd be great. When that happens. So, one of the things I am very determined about is that engaged research is something that happens throughout the research process, which is where I came with this idea of kind of born engaged. You know, it's not just about something we add on at the end. It's about a way of working that starts with thinking and collaborating on what the issues are, what the questions might be, as well as in doing the research and right the way through and ensuring outcomes. So we also have a sense of what engaged research is not, but we might come to that later. So this is the definition that we're working from. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleagues, Katrina Wyatt, who many of you will know. Katrina is the Deputy Director for Engaged Research in the Centre, and Rachell Purtell is the Centre's critical friend around engagement. The reason I'm handing over at this stage is because Rachell and Katrina have lived this. And so they're going to share some of their experiences and their case studies and their examples about engaged research to get us thinking. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Brilliant.
And I will sit here and be their beautiful assistant and move the slides across.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, so hello everyone, I'm Katrina. I know hopefully most of you, and I'm going to get to know all of you over the duration of the centre. Rachell and I have worked together for an organisation that was funded by the Department of Health around creating a culture of meaningful involvement of patient service users and carers. So a lot of what we're going to talk about has come from our experience of working in this way over the last 12 or so years. So transformative research, as Anne said, we want our research to have transformative potential. And maybe one of the ways, and this is what we're going to try and enthuse and share with you, that we can be transformative is in how we do our research. So maybe the transformative potential of the research comes from the way that we engage our communities, our publics. So we think this will mean starting with a shared understanding of the nature of the problem, co-creating ways of responding to this problem. We're going to generate new forms of evidence together, and we're going to think about how we will know we've succeeded in creating a culture of engaged research. So it's really about how we do our work. And years ago, before I'd even met Rachell, BR before Rachell, there was I used to, never before Robin. Never before. Sorry, Wendy. We're going to have to change our name. I used to work in obstetrics and gynecology as a researcher in Staffordshire University. And we did systematic reviews. We collected all the evidence around women who had premenstrual syndrome and what drug treatments might support women experiencing severe premenstrual syndrome. And we did a meta-analysis. We collected all the data, added it all together of the most popular drug at that time for women with severe premenstrual syndrome. And we submitted it to the Lancet. And the editor came back to me and went, yeah, okay, that's interesting, but how do you know that the symptoms you have chosen to say whether these drugs are effective or not are the ones that matter to the women? I was like, oh my God, how awful that had literally not occurred to me. And so from that moment on, I went back, I spoke with women, we reanalysed the data according to the most cardinal symptom that women told us about, which was irritability and anger, and we got it published, and I was hooked. So that's my story.
Coming to work at.
Oh yeah, I also, embarrassingly, so Exeter Medical School used to be Peninsula Medical School, and I really wanted to move back to the West Country, and so I googled PMS and Exeter and thought I had hit the epicentre of premenstrual syndrome research, which was also a good thing about acronyms and not using them. So I think, yeah, we want to think about be transformative in how we do our research, and this is also going to mean there are some practical considerations as well. So are our structures, are our processes really open and accessible to everyone? And Rachel's going to talk more about this. But one of the things, I think, just even thinking where we hold our meetings with our publics, the power dynamics, are we always inviting people in, or are we actually going to go out to them and be in their space? So in terms of the centre, we work with lots and lots and lots of interesting people. We work with people who provide services, doctors, teachers, police. We work with workplaces. How do we create health and wellbeing in different workplaces, be that for children in schools, be that for NHS staffs in hospitals. Obviously, we work with other researchers. We work with people who make policies. We had a meeting with an MP the last week about a possible internship where MPs come and actually work with us and see how we generate evidence. We want to work with communities and community groups. Basically, people whose lives might be affected by the research that we do. That's who the centre works with. Thanks.
Hello. Okay. I take it you can all see, and I take it you can all hear, otherwise somebody would have shouted at us so far. Is that right? Yes, okay, good. Okay, so, what do we mean by engaged research? Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you what we don't mean, I'm afraid, because I think it's quite important. We don't mean research with participants. Basically, we don't mean people who simply answer your questions. We don't mean people that are counted in surveys and numbers and things. We don't mean giving out information about science or about research. We don't mean pilot studies that are created to do on people. We don't mean projects that come from the community but equally are going to be done on people, and those people have had no input into the design or the process. That's what we don't mean by engaged research. So we'll get that bit out of the way. What we do mean by engaged research is when people with first-hand experience of the issues or the problems have a meaningful influence over the process and have some control in it. And that can be in many forms. As Anne has already said, it can be all sorts of things. It could be as being part of an advisory group, that's a very classic way of doing it, or it could mean working alongside a researcher to help with the design and the development and even actually collecting the data, or it can mean actually people who are not traditional researchers becoming researchers, working alongside you as academic researchers. It has lots of things, there's lots of potential in what you can do. And as Anne's already said, there is no one way of doing this. There's lots of opportunities. Some of the things that it's important to know is engaged research, it is about recognising that first-hand experience. I'm too far away from the table, but if I'm not, no one's for you. So, no, you can't hide. It's about accepting that first-hand experience is an essential part of the work you're going to do, and it needs to inform your work. And it's valuable. It's of value. It's about not getting into a sort of aggressive kind of, fending off criticisms, this happened, no, it didn't, it's not about any of that stuff. It's about accepting experience as you're given it. You might want to develop it, you might want to understand it better, but it's not about people saying, oh, that didn't happen, that did happen. It's not about any of that stuff. And at its very heart, at every point that you might have a decision to make in your research, it's about looking to whether you can share the power in that decision making and actually making those decisions with people rather than just about them or about your work. Does that make sense so far?
What we are going to do is give you loads of examples of some different ways that we've done some engaged research or engaged people in research. Okay, so ethics. Our understanding is that you don't need ethics to design and develop a proposal. You're talking to people.
Thumbs up there.
You're talking to people, it's like you talk to colleagues about your research. At this point, you're all in it together, you're sharing experiences, you're co-creating questions, you're developing your proposal. As soon as you have your research proposal, even if your publics are your researchers, the same ethical requirements apply to everybody. Okay, because you're then going out and you're collecting data and you need ethics approval, because then no matter how nicely you ask your questions, we are taking data from people and we need ethics approval for that. Under the new
GDPR.
Thank you.
Which stands for
General Data Protection Regulations.
Thank you very much.
And Revised Data Protection Act of 2018, so we don't want to see 1998 quoted anymore.
Well, that's why you're here, Pam.
We do need to be really clear with people what personal information we're holding on them. But I think this is part of the conversation about how people want to be contacted, So we would talk to people and say, are you happy for us to contact you by phone? Or how would you like to be contacted? This means we're going to hold your phone number and your email address on record. Are you happy with that? The moment you're not happy with that, you can tell us and we'll delete it.
So, Katrina, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Pam's here with us. Is that recognised institutionally, that first sentence there? Or would somebody in the institution come and say, you should have? So how widespread is that recognition that that early stage doesn't require ethical approval? That's the first question. The second is that the aim of ethical approval sometimes is to evaluate risk. Are you saying there is no risk involved in working with at that stage and you don't need to evaluate that?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, it is accepted at national level that it's really important to encourage patients and the public to be involved in the design and the development of any research project. Ideally, whichever organisation that is within, we would like to know about it as soon as possible. So hopefully you would come to the ethics, research ethics and governance team and ask for, some guidance on what you're doing for your project, and we would obviously make sure that your approaches were going to be satisfactory. It's a very good point, because obviously you do need to have a real sensitivity about how you engage with patients and the public in the research process. So
Kath has got one to do. Sorry to interrupt you, but I can see
Yeah,
Kath waving at the back.
I think that's not just at the beginning of the project, though. I think there's other points of public involvement and engagement that don't necessarily need to go through ethics, when we're involving people in shaping how the analysis might be done. We're involving people in shaping how the dissemination might be done. So I think we need to be careful not just saying it's only when you're coming up with the questions.
But that should be covered within the design, because if you're designing your project, you're thinking about how you're planning to disseminate it and the whole.
Well, that might need to go
process.
back to ethics once we've got feedback, but actually having a workshop with members of the public about actually this is what we were saying we were doing, is that right still from here? that bit. I mean, to have to go to the ethics for that workshop before you change your plans and go back to ethics with your changed plans would be very cumbersome.
I think it's really important to get hung up on ethics at this point. I think it's central to what we do, and we have to start thinking carefully about it. But I don't want to Pam's here, if you've got a question, talk to her. But I think what we're saying is, think carefully of when you're designing what the implications that has for who you're engaging with and how you're conducting the research. And there are people like Pam and there's information on the university website that you can turn to for advice.
I think that's important, that we need to know. It's important that we know where to go to for advice.
Absolutely,
that's the issue. At the start, at early stage,
Yes.
That's useful.
And I think one of the things that we want to do is to develop an ethical code of conduct for how we engage, which will have a lot of practical considerations as well as ethical considerations. But at this stage, come and talk to us. You know, please do think about going out and engaging and talking to people about your ideas. You know, the starting point is to try and get us out of our ivory towers and actually understanding what real life issues, what real life barriers to health and well-being are, and the starting point being people's experiences rather than our preconceptions around what the nature of the issues are for people.
Don't need ethics for that starting point.
No.
Is that right, Pam?
As a university, we encourage our researchers to look at the research toolkit part of the website, which will guide you on the areas of like good research practice, and then provides contact details for our office and who to go to, and also for our data protection team. So I think sometimes the research, the university website's a little underused, and people don't know where to go to necessarily to look for information. But there is a lot of information there, and I think a lot of the policies are changing around how tight we are getting around data protection, and even our sponsor confirmation letter, we are now adding in that researchers are expected to have done our information governance training through the university and also set out a data management plan. So that would incorporate then when you were engaging with patients and the public.
Did you?
I suppose the thing that I would be thinking about if I had my student shoes back on would be, okay, when are you thinking I'm going to have to put this ethics application in? Because maybe in the past I'd have bunged it in as quickly as possible, but it sounds like I would have to wait a bit. And do you have a kind of feel within the rhythm of the PhD of when you assume that roughly we should be thinking about putting our ethics application in?
Well, I think that does depend on the nature of the PhD, but also as someone who's just gone through the medical school ethics process for a piece of co-created work, working with a group of dancers down in an economically disadvantaged area in West Cornwall, actually having done that engagement, having gone and talked to them about the research, having said, what is it you want from the research? How do you want us to come and work with you? It made applying for ethics so much easier because I'd already negotiated the processes with them. So it wasn't, and I'm going to go and try and do it this way. It was, and this is how the young people have said they want to ask the questions. This is how they've said they want to be involved. So I think I wouldn't rush to do your ethics. You absolutely have to have ethics if you are collecting data. No question. But maybe have some of the conversations and use that to inform how you're going to do your research, and then have them helping, if people are happy to, your ethics application.
Please contact us as early as possible. Yeah, please. I mean, that's one thing that we can't emphasise enough, is that contacting us early really does help. We don't really like to see last minute applications like, oh, I want to submit this next week, because we're covering a huge area and really trying to get through something in a couple of days is impossible.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next one.
Yes, thank you, Anne. Okay, so I think this is really important, and this is a cornerstone of how we want to work within the centre and how we've worked before. And this is the idea that people are going to give up their time. They're going to give their experiences. They're going to share their expertise with us. And I used to think, well, and they get to take part in a research project. Now, yeah, okay, try and sell that a bit better, Katrina. So for me, for us, it is about co-creating the questions, agreeing the design, but it's also about thinking what happens after the research project's ended. We put a lot of time in thinking about developing it, we put a lot of time into delivering it and disseminating it. And then what? Do we just go, oh, cheerio, we thank you ever so much, we've taken everything we need and hopefully you've enjoyed the research and
I've got my grant and my PhD and my whatever it is, and the institution's really happy, and yeah, bye.
And there is this notion of drive-by academics where we, screech to a halt, we take what we want and zoom off into the distance, never to be seen again. So I think about it from the outset. How are you going to manage the relationships? Are there follow-on pieces of work that people might want to do? Not necessarily you're going to have to do them, but there may be signposts that you can share with people about where they can go and take ideas. So, it's the beginning, it's at the middle, it's at the end, and it's the beyond the end as well. As Anne and Rachel have said, it's everyone's responsibility. And for PhDs, I think that means it's your whole supervisory team's responsibility. We're here to help, we're here to support, but we all need to sign up to this as the way we're going to do our research. It's not a means in itself. It's the engagement activity is not the end. It's a process. That's what I guess I'm trying to say. Thank you.
So, the when. As we said, there is no one way to do this, but there are some things that you need to know and it is worth knowing about. Notwithstanding ethics, and the one thing to remember about ethics is it's not meant to get in the way, it's meant to support and protect. So if you think you're going to have an ethical problem, as Pam says, talk to them. So ideally, if you've had that conversation, because you need to, what you would be looking at is where you can engage people. At the beginning, usually a really good idea. In co-creating and setting the question, that goes back to understanding the problem in the transformation from the perspective of the people that had first-hand experience. Designing your research project. Yes, not everybody will understand how you design a research project. You can explain that to people and people can help you. As I said, if you have a point to make decisions, you can engage people. If you've got decisions to make about a project, you can engage people. So collecting your results, obviously, interpreting the results, in your dissemination, including publishing. We've got lots of examples of co-published and co-created and co-written. I've had lots of arguments with lots of journals that have printed some wonderful co-created research projects and then made it completely impossible for the people that it was co-created to see the actual documents because they're on a closed journal. So I have lots of fights with that to get them on our website, which we did. So there's some really important stuff. So don't forget that publishing is a really, really important thing. Yeah, I've said all the rest of it. Where are people? Well, wherever they're going to be, really. They're going to be in their homes, they're going to be in community or support groups, they're going to be in their workplaces. As Katrina was saying, do not assume everybody was going to want to come to you. Actually, create a culture where they don't all have to come to you, where we go out to people, where we find people, where we work with people. Personal contact works best. We may be digitally born. I don't feel digitally born, actually. I remember the world before. I did Pitman's on a typewriter and everything I did. So I remember the world before it was digital. And in many ways, personal contact is really important, because our experience would say there are two main reasons why people will help you create a piece of work. One is because they've got something they really want to say about their first-hand experience, and because they trust you. They trust you are going to do something with what you say to them. All of this becomes pointless if all you're going to do is go away and do exactly what you were going to do in the first place. It's not a good way of doing it. So it's really important that people know who you are so that they can trust you and they can work with you. Can we have the next one? Thank you. And as Anne said, there's no one way to do this, but there are some really important things about how you create the conditions to make this work. Clarity about what you're doing. If you are delivering a PhD, if you are delivering a grant, you do need to be clear about that. So if somebody says, I want to go to America and design the Grand Canyon or whatever, that's not going to be in your remit to give people, because that's not. So you just need to be honest and clear about your parameters, about the amount of time that you've got, about the amount of resource that you've got. You don't want to promise people or make out that you've got everything to offer people if you don't have. Access and communication are everything when it comes to engagement. If you get that wrong, it won't work. If you get it right, people will feel incredibly valued, and actually in many ways your engagement will look after itself if you create the right conditions. And they are the physical and practical conditions. That's like having a room people can get into if you're creating a meeting. It's your use of language, it's your use of jargon, it's things like timing of meetings and about being realistic about what can be done in that time and whether or not you need to do it 2 or 3 times, all of which you negotiate with the people you're wanting to engage with. Communication. Not everybody has an internet connection. Not everybody is on email. Not everybody can read small print. Not everybody can read stuff on screens. You do need to think about communication. How do people want to communicate with you? Do not assume, find out, because it's really important that you get that right. Keeping people informed. If you are doing a piece of work and for some reason it's been caught up in ethics for the next 10 years, tell people that it's caught up in ethics for the next 10 years. Tell people what's going on. Even if you've got nothing more to tell them, because then you will keep them engaged and you will keep your communication going. Tell them what's happening. If you've sent something, if you've co-created something and you're going to get it published and you've not heard from the publisher for the next, 6 months, tell them. It's really, really important that you keep communication going. And we have the next one. Thank you. Finances. Don't assume everybody can cough up for their travel in advance. They can't necessarily. Don't assume that just giving money back for people's travel is not going to cause them problems. Check it out and make sure that it's going to be all right. Same with accommodation. If you're going to pay people for their time, and there's lots of advice and lots of information about that, but if that is going to cause problems for people, you need to know and you need to find out and you need to negotiate it with people if that's what you're going to do. The aim is to create the conditions for good involvement. It is not to tell people what their engagement is. And this is where it gets a little bit confused, is that we go, right, we're going to tell people to talk about this. It's like, no, we do. You make people feel really valued by doing all of those things I just said. And then you say, right, broadly, this is the thing that we want to talk about. And then you let people get on with that with your help and your guidance. That's what you do. So don't try and control your engagement, because if you do, well, one, it will just be really boring.
Rich.
Sorry.
Can I just say something about finance?
Yes.
About use of tokens and gifts or whatever other method you want to use, just being sure that it's at a sensible limit so that it's not seen as coercive. Because an ethics committee would see that if you were offering way too much money, that would be seen as coercive. So it has to be realistic.
For people that are engaged in the design?
Anyone that's engaged.
Oh, okay.
If you're saying to, you know, because essentially when you're applying to the ethics committee and you're saying what, you know, sort of money is going to be used, they'd also want to know, if you were saying, oh, we're giving the people that have been involved in helping the development £300 vouchers, they might look a little bit suspiciously at it. It's not always just about the participants that you want to actually recruit into a study. So just think practically.
Yeah, but that also depends on how much involvement.
It does.
So
It's absolutely on a study by study basis.
An absolute amount, but it's relative to.
Yeah, you would expect to cover travel and any other expenses like that. But if you're offering any vouchers or promotional things, it just needs to be sensible. I think it's a good idea, but
Okay, I mean, there are different ways of doing it though, aren't there, Pam? Because if people are co-creating, it might be that you honorary contract them and you pay them through like
that would be different.
Visiting academic rate or whatever. There are lots of different ways of doing it.
Yes, absolutely.
And paying people is a debate for your project is whether or not you're going to do that. And the other thing about vouchers and things, they can equally cause people problems. So you just need to, before you get into any of that, it's a conversation to have with the people, whether it's even something that is feasible to do, whether it's going to cause those problems. And then some of the methodology, you need to think about how you're going to do it. And that's just something that it's such a big conversation that it's got to be project specific and people specific.
And often it's influenced by the funders. I
was going to say, the welcome trust, you have to specify and justify. That's the issue. If you can do that, then they will accept it. But the more general point for people going through this is that we do have expertise in the centre and support, and more widely across the university where these things, you can get advice. That's the
centre people, students, research fellows, we have Lucy and Jill who are across lots of the finance around the university, and if they can't help you directly, they know the people who can help you. So if you've got any thoughts about that or any questions, any issues, we have people in the centre.
I think the thing is, it's not actually been clarified across the university at the moment,
right?
And actually, it's a bit of a pig's ear at the moment.
What we cannot do is pay honoraria, although we are. At times, don't tell anybody that.
You didn't hear me say that.
No, because we went, for some of our participants in our exam advisory board, we just asked Steve Smith and said, can we do it? And he said, yes. But generally speaking, you have to be careful about how you pay people. It's absolutely right. And the kind of challenges that creates for them. So it's really worth taking advice on it. Different types of projects, different types of way of paying. One of the ways we do it is somebody becoming a provider of the university, where it's costed hourly according to a certain rate that is agreed in advance by the funders or the university. But it is something really important to bear in mind that we don't. That's a very easy way to exploit people straight away, to get them in and convince them they're co-creating and they're part of it, and actually you're just using their time. It's really important that relationship is not abused in those kind of ways. But there are some operational aspects of that that take into account the research, but also individual circumstances. That's a really good point.
We have actually had 2 or 3 instances where the researchers that had to apply through the Health Research Authority, but they're using people to support the research and going to other areas, so external to Exeter. And we really become stuck because that person doesn't have a contract, and of course the Health Research Authority wants to know whether they've got a contract or not. Are they actually authorised to be able to access an NHS site? And because they don't have a contract, it's quite hard then to get them we might use a research passport system, but research passport system is based on your HR, sort of supporting that application. But we have had a couple that we've, thankfully the university has been able to help out and find a way to do it. But it's when you get out into that, sort of.
If you make people honorary research fellows or research associates, does that make it any easier?
Apparently not, but I think, if there is a query like that, I think our HR people are the best to advise.
And we're here to challenge the structures.
Which is how we got around the honorarium thing, by just saying this is stupid.
Exactly.
Senior people to give their time for the centre, pay them.
So
Absolutely.
So I think just to sort of almost ground this ever so slightly, because I sense my own terror rising as I listen to this. Oh my God! And therefore I'm assuming that our colleagues who are going to start out on this will be feeling similar, if not greater degrees of terror. We want everyone who's going to embark on this to be as ambitious as possible, with bearing in mind this ethos of transformation, and everybody that we've funded who's in this room at the moment in one form or another has spoken to us from that value set of transformation, and so I think we're already talking to you on that basis, but we want you to have a sense of the difficulties, because we want you to at the same time have a sense of the scope of what's possible. And I would just say, always come to us, but there's loads of us that you can speak to, but really feel that you can really push the boat out on this for the benefit of your research. That's really what's at stake, and we will do whatever we can to help you or point you in the direction that you need to go. So don't be overwhelmed at this stage. See this as a kind of almost mapping the territory of what's possible, and know that everybody from Pam to Katrina and Anne is here, and myself to try and Rachell, and everybody. We've got something that we can help, so yeah.
I would reiterate what Robin's just said. Engagement can either be about the barriers that we have, or we create engagements to challenge those and change them, and they are the choices that we make. And however challenging it might be, come up with what you want to do, and we will try even if we end up yelling at various departments, which I made a career of doing when I worked for Bakers. We were the first project ever to have petty cash to pay people's expenses, and they kept saying, I had 5 conversations with them, and we don't give petty cash to pay expenses for travel for people coming. And I was like, yes, I heard you tell me that 5 times. Could you give me the reason why it's not possible to do it? No, it's just that we don't. Right. How about we do it then? Because this is what I need to deliver the grant to change a culture and make a culture of engagement. And if you don't let me do that, I can't deliver this thing. So what I would say, what is really important...
And that's had a lasting impact, let me say.
Yeah.
And we still use that today.
It's nightmares.
I was a university, I fought with every department. I fought with personnel to get people, whatever the associate honorees, whatever they were. But there are ways of doing this, as long as you're mindful that, we need to do it in a way that isn't risky. We need to do it, but in terms of challenging some of the barriers and challenging some of the things, we are talking about creating an engaged way of doing research. That's going to shake a few trees, that's going to make a few differences. But don't be afraid of doing it. Don't be afraid of wanting to do it. Don't be afraid of planning it. Don't be afraid of wanting to go out there and do it, because otherwise we will just end up with the same research that changes nothing. If research was as brilliant as we all hope it is, we wouldn't have half the problems in the world that we do at the moment. So just don't be afraid of it. Come up with your plans, come up with your ideas, come up with who you want to work with, and we'll find a way. We might fudge it a bit, but we'll find a way of doing it. And believe me, we've done that a million times. It is possible. Sorry, that's fine.
Also adding to that I frequently stand up to the HRA for our students, so we'll find a way. We find a way around it. So even if you get through that ethical part and you're then being challenged by the Health Research Authority, we will always defend our researchers and help them through that process. So it's not that they're just thrown out and they have to get on with it and try and sort it out. We will try and help. So it's
I don't know if do we have time to go back to something? Yes, thank you. The answer is yes, according to Rachel, we do.
What was that?
If we want to do something, we do. No, I'm worried about with whom we engage as a critical challenge for us. And if I go back to, and I don't want to trivialise this, but I will, and it's politically incorrect, but if we go back to PMS, you do this study and somebody says, what about the women? What about the men? Mm-hmm. Why don't you, at what point do you select who you're talking with? At what point can you go beyond what looks like a fairly established group in some senses? What obligation do we have to move beyond conventional in exactly the same way? I think you're absolutely right, Rachel, we need to break things, but there are a lot of challenges that we're dealing with in the centre with whom, through which we want to engage with very different populations. How do we do that without dictating the question at the start? That's your point about you say to people this is the broad area and then let it emerge, that's fine, but the identification of the area might be mine or ours still, and that will presuppose certain audiences, groups, partners, and in some ways we might still not disrupt the model that we have of research and engagement.
Okay, all right. So, okay, if you go for a broad area and first-hand experience,
yeah,
that means you're not necessarily looking at established groups. You're not necessarily looking at. You're thinking about first-hand experience.
Yeah.
If you're doing a piece of work which is about men that suffer domestic abuse, which is a fairly rare area, then you would talk to men who suffer domestic abuse. Now, how you might find those people, you may start through a organisation or a helpline. Chances are through that you find other people.
Yeah.
So you can't know who you get. You can't know what you don't know. I'm not going to do your job. But you can't know what you don't know. That's not possible. It would be silly to imagine that this one centre can change everything in the whole world. That's
it was all predicated. No, you're right. The question then is, how far can you go realistically?
You can go as far as your relationships will take you.
Yeah.
Kath, go on.
Yeah, I think there's a real block to engaged research is worrying about who you've not engaged yet. That means you end up stomping on the people that you're engaging with because you're giving the message that they're not the right people. And I think what we have to do is respect the relationships we've got and look beyond them as well. And I think we need to relax about it a bit. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to be a bit patchy here and a bit patchy there. But what we've got to do is be just courageous and keep going.
And I think that's part of the iterative process, which is what you were referring to earlier, of engaged research, is that the people that you speak to initially may snowball to the people that appear to be more of a community of interest later on. And also as a kind of an added point, it's a bit like the kind of Bertrand Russell with philosophy thing. You've got to have some concrete ideas to start with, otherwise you're questioning everything, and you can never do. You can't move forward. I imagine the same is the case.
Well, I think one of the things we've talked about in the centre is this sense that the communities with which we want to engage don't necessarily exist yet, and we have to build them, and we need to build them by starting somewhere, and then, and as Kath says, relaxing a little bit, acknowledging that we haven't got everybody in the world,
And that we're not going to be able to address all the questions that people bring to us. So we also have to be relaxed about signposting people in communities to other researchers, other places, other institutions that might be better fitted to work with them. So
yeah, no, I take that. The advice to relax is always good. Or not. The shit, I forgot.
Listen, we're going to do really well.
Remember, I was going to say something.
And I think it might pick up on what you're saying, so maybe that's what you're thinking. I do think, though, that there's one important point in what Mark was saying that we mustn't forget. Everything else is right, I agree with everything, but I think we too easily identify the public and neglect that people don't live in a vacuum. And that even when we are looking at women who suffer from PMS, that there are a bunch of people around them that influence those experiences and that influence the extent to which they can do something about those experiences. And so I guess what Mark was alluding to, and I definitely want to stress, is the need to reflect very carefully about who those publics are, and then to remain open about being wrong and not looking at the right people, without getting into the trap of it's never good enough and I'm talking to you, but really I should be talking to him, so I'm not going to pay attention.
I think, I mean, you put it very nicely, Manuela, thank you. The subtext of that is that we have an opportunity also to challenge the methodology here and to be honest in our methodological reflections. So it doesn't have to be retentive or blocked, but it has to be honest in terms of the way we evaluate what we have done and contribute to methodology around this. I mean, think of Snowball, for example, which is an established way of developing oral history connections. That's very, very strong, but it's also limited in some ways. And we have to be open and honest about that without saying we have to do everything or talk to anybody. So there's an opportunity for us to, when we're talking about engaged research and challenging the paradigms, thinking about the Wellcome Trust as well, we need to be robust methodologically and in terms of reflection about how we do this to make the case at the end of 5 years that we need more money. That's the instrumental approach, but it's the quality of the research that will make that argument and the quality of the reflections about the methods we're adopting and the way we're engaging that will make the argument for us.
But engaging isn't a methodology. Engaging is something that you do throughout your methodology. It's not a technique. It's not a method. It is something you do, and you can do it in whatever method or whatever methodology you're working in. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a way of working. It's a way of delivering.
Well, I would say a way of working is a methodology. But that's academic speak, because when we go back to Wellcome Trust and say, what have you done? And I say, I paid Robin to go somewhere, and that's it. That's not going to be enough. What is going to be important, and I'm thinking about a very instrumental approach to centre funding and making this possible, is a demonstration that the way we have worked has created in key ways through engagement. And to some extent, what you call it might not matter, but there is a sense in which we have to track and demonstrate how we've worked and its value.
So I think it's I think it's really important for all of the guys who are in the room who are starting on this journey to take seriously kind of both parts of this discourse. And one way of navigating a course through this is to be thinking about how you evaluate the engaged dimension of your research. And in a sense, there's no right way of doing it, but we also need to tell a robust story about it. So I think the emphasis I would, I may get this wrong, but the emphasis I would say is do process evaluation. Make sure that you record at all stages what you're doing so that you can tell a story about how you've gone about doing your engagement and what impacts working in this way has had on your research, so that you can demonstrate in some way the impact on your research design, the impact on the conduct of your research, the impact on your research findings, and the impact on your research outcomes. So there's a coherent story you can tell. I think with Kath, I think we can become very quickly obsessed with what we don't do, and that becomes an excuse not to do. And for a lot of the people I've worked in the past that I've sort of torn what little hair left out, the two things that most kind of ground into me. One is this kind of obsession with representativeness. That's a false methodological problem that's being imposed from the wrong place onto this way of doing research. Representativeness doesn't exist in this. The second thing is gatekeepers. Gatekeepers will try and close off these spaces of potentiality, and in doing so will damp down the potential for challenging and changing and disrupting, because there will be vested interests in doing things in the way that they're already doing it. I think the reason why I think it's right that Rachell emphasised why getting engagement from the beginning is so important is that you can, through the process of engagement, you can allow the research problem that you're working on to be shaped. And it's the research problem that emerges through that initial phase of engaging will determine how you do your work, and will determine the shapes that your work take. And your work, in the same way that Rachell was saying, if you get your communication and all of the access stuff right, the engagement will follow with that. Similarly, if that research problem emerges through genuine engagement, then everything else will follow. So if you get that early stuff right, the potential for transformation, because you can be sure that a co-created research problem will not be the same as a research problem that emerged from within a discipline, because we do things in an academic way, and it's like you said, Rachell, if we got it right already, we wouldn't have any of these problems and we'd be winning, but we're not. So I would say that really finding a way to be able to listen from the outset is just absolutely crucial, and hear what people are telling you. Hear why people are telling you that what you're doing isn't right, or what other academics have done isn't right, or what policymakers aren't doing what's right, and think, okay, well, how can we begin to shape this into something that begins to look like a possible research problem or question that we can do this work on?
Should we show some examples? Yes. Do you want to come back?
All I was going to say, in terms of welcome, I'm not sure that any of the other centres are doing it or are approaching engagement from this point of view.
Right.
You're already there.
Absolutely right.
Right?
Yep.
So, and in academic terms, the amount of arguments I've had, paper up being one of them, but their priority. Do it like this, no one else is doing it like this, okay, we'll do it like that. It's the best way to get academics to do something different is go, no one else is doing it. Isn't it, Kath? It's the best way to do it. And you're already halfway there. So what could be better than showing how you're doing it and doing it well? That there won't be anything better than I know Welcome's approach to engagement.
Yeah.
It ain't generally this.
No, it's not.
So all you need is a couple of, well, hopefully more, but you just need some good projects.
I think that's absolutely the key to it, because then you can both show the impact of the projects, but also the ways in which they emerged, and having that evidence. And I think it's one of the challenges of the centre, and this is why it's great to have PhD students and research fellows, is that those projects will make the case for the value of doing it this way.
No pressure.
Okay, you were saying about where projects come from. This project, Kath, do you mind if I?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I knew Kath through work, didn't I? Kath was part of this project. She can tell you or not tell you. I had no idea that
You're
Kath.
fast caring, aren't you?
I had no idea that this might be a relevant project to Kath. Where were we? Sheffield or somewhere?
Yeah, we were doing a presentation for Clark at Sheffield, weren't we?
And we were in the back of a cab, were we?
That's right.
And I was talking about
Do we want to
this
go there?
idea, and that's how Kath became involved in this. This idea for past caring came from two people that were already members of Focus and were on what we called our advisory group. Brian, who you're going to hear about in a minute, came to us from a completely different reason, a completely different piece of work. And Rosemary, who joined Focus as a carer, was somebody who'd been a carer for years and years and years and been one of our members. And that's how this piece of work came about, because Brian and Rosemary were having a conversation in different parts of the room about some of their experience. And I heard this conversation. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. They were both our members. They'd both come to us for completely different reasons, nothing to do with this project, and they started to talk about their experience. So we said, should we do something with this? And it became a really, really important project. Are you
ready to go?
Okay, yeah.
We tell stories about sports cars, wedding blossoms, dogs, a naked man and a button box. The atmosphere was magical. Games and laughter fostered trust to help us tell stories of personal grief. Looking through old photos of a lost child, partner, parent or friend was hard. Coming to this group was difficult. We were together for 4 intensive, focused days, during which we learnt how to tell a good story in 2 minutes, and how to use technology to make photos and images into a film. Why were we there? And why did we gain such satisfaction from seeing our finished work? Because the project was ours, conceived and developed by carers. The stories were ours too, told in our voices and our words, using our own images. What we couldn't fit into that digi-story, we told in extended interviews. Most projects about carers end when the cared-for person dies. Our project tells of what comes next, how we feel and what we experience. The best teachers and technical experts shared their skills with us, and we've gone on to help others to collect more stories. By publishing these unheard stories on our website, we raise issues about carer bereavement, build community amongst former carers, and inform services of necessary changes in practice. Past caring aims to take you into the unknown, coaxing you to the edge of stories you haven't heard before, and at the same time resonating with something deep inside, telling you, yes, I hear that, I know.
Past caring involved 7 people. It cost us £9,000. We won the public engagement impact award for Exeter University with it. There was nothing on people's experience once they had been carers and that person had gone. This project came about simply because I happened to be in the room with people that we knew who were talking about this experience, and it changed people's lives. It gave people skills that they wouldn't have had because they wanted it. The design was completely led by the people it was about. The people that helped with the project were also our participants. It was a horrific issue, but we sorted it. It took a long time, but we sorted it. It took a long time to get it off the ground, but it made a real difference to people. It's really important that you don't worry if you can't change 20,000 people's lives in one go. What matters is you do what you can do and you do a bit of it.
Okay, and this is not my work, this is amazing work that Lorraine and Felicity are leading on, and I happen to have the pleasure of being part of it. But we're trying to understand moral narratives around mental ill health in very low income communities. And from the outset it was important that we negotiated the work with the communities that we would be collecting the data from. So we met with people, talked to the partnerships during the application process. We got their approval for the bid, and we asked them how they'd like to carry on being involved. And to our deep joy, they're part of an advisory group, and they have been invaluable. So they've actually helped us interpret some of the findings from the work. One of the pieces of work we're doing is looking at video consultations between doctors and patients around mental ill health, and consultations that we thought were really good examples of how not to do a consultation. People said, that GP got that bit right. Absolutely, so they've really changed the way we've looked at the findings and our understanding of it. They're actually helping us. They're making short films of their experiences of mental distress, but also being part of the research process. And this is feeding in fundamentally about changing the way things are done. So we're developing training materials for GPs using these findings, using the films that people are making. And just in terms of the culture of reciprocity, Suzanne, who is administrator, sort of relationship holder, if you like, within this project, she's working with these communities, helping them write bids so that they can carry on in the partnerships that they've developed. So there's that culture of reciprocity. We are giving something back that's outside of the research to the communities through Suzanne's time. Yeah, fine. So
probably need to skip on to the what can engaged research do for you.
Okay. So you've got some handouts. You can have the film. There's some other examples of work. What we would just like you to spend 5 minutes or so thinking about, and then obviously this is the beginning of the conversation, around why do you think engaged research is going to be good for your research? Think what possibility space might it open up?
You can write it down if you really want to shout it out.
You can talk in group. We don't mind.
Talk in groups for now, and then we'll have a couple of minutes to feedback.
Yes,
Or you can just go
I thought we had Rebecca. I did have
No, she never joined us.
Oh, okay.
You, right?
Sorry to cut, but I'm unconscious.
No, next on the slides as well. So yeah. No worries.
You have your teeth done a little bit of enough. More milk than you, yes. Not much more because Rachel.
Yeah, it's funny. Why don't you
Thank you ever so much. I'll stop them. Yeah, I thought I was going to do it because it's my slide after this, which is the how will you proceed and the what can we do to support. So I'm thinking I'm going to stop them in a minute. Just get. I was deliberately going to say we'd like to hear from some of the PhD students and the research fellows at this point, since you're the ones doing the research. And of course, we're working on one of the research support, the RSF projects, the research support funding. So that's. Okay. I realise that was very short, 5 minutes. Carry on.
You're here.
Okay.
You are
a couple of minutes feedback about what you think about this question. How engaged research will be good for your research. And what I'd really like to do is appeal to the PhD students and research fellows. You know, you're the ones who are at the cutting edge, doing all the hard work. So I'd really like to get a sense from you of how you think engaged research is going to be good for your research. And actually, the interesting thing about today is we've got everybody in the room. We've got small research support funded projects, we've got PhD projects, we've got research fellows, we've got PIs, we've got everybody in the room. So it'd be really interesting to just hear. So if anybody feels brave enough to speak up from those groups about what you think and what you're feeling at the moment, Veronica?
Well, I'm going to say something annoying in that I try my best all the time, but I understand the reason behind the question, but I think it's the wrong question. To me, I'm sure engaged research will. I have many complex feelings about many facets of it, the way my project is working and the way whatever one might term engagement would happen. But that's by the by. The point is not whether it will impact what I write or what I analyse. The point is that it's the right thing to do. So it's immaterial. I know, moreover, like what we mean, what will be good research is also immaterial. If you're doing it unethically, it doesn't matter.
But I completely agree, obviously. But you are embarking on a PhD, are you not?
Well, for my sins.
So, at some level, there's a methodology and research that goes with that, because, yes, you're right, of course. If it's not going to be useful, what the hell do it? But that's not how the world of PhDs generally work, and that's what you're embarking on. It's a little bit like, you know, there are other ways to change the world.
Anybody else? Any of our other students?
Well, I'm an art and soft person.
Yeah.
So, as Anne described to me, I'm an art and soft person. I don't have a funding requirement in order to engage research, but while I believe that there's a kind of an axiological kind of reason, there's a value reason for doing it, I believe that it's going to improve the integrity of my research. And from a power dynamic perspective, if I'm going to be engaging with communities of interest, and I go back to them iteratively throughout the process, and then go back to them with my findings and say, how do you respond to this? Instead of me, having that kind of very transmissive approach of, I've got all of these fancy theories that I believe are true, but these normally do not come from the communities. They come from the academics who are, I'm interested in social class, they come from the middle class academics who are positioned somewhat outside those communities. So that's why I'm interested. I believe it's going to make my research better.
Good. Any other thoughts?
Jessie? I'm quite interested in what is going to steer my research. Is it going to be, if I was doing this PhD somewhere else, it would be the literature that I was engaging with and things that have already been written, and that would determine the kinds of avenues that I would go down and the kinds of things I was interested in. But if it's being steered through engaged research, then there are so many different other facets that are going to be revealed through those relationships that aren't out there already, I would imagine. I can't tell you what they are because I haven't done the engagement yet, but that's what's exciting to me about it.
That's fantastic. Excellent. Fred, carry on.
I think on a personal level, I just quite like to make my mum proud of me.
Good luck with that.
My mum is a kind of community artist who left school when she was 12, etc., etc. And she thinks I do some kind of ivory tower, elitist stuff.
Has she read anything you've read?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
No, but she's all throughout my PhD, she was asking me kind of awkward questions. I'd sort of call them and be like, oh, Mum, I'm going to organise a conference. And she'd say, well, who can come? And I'm sort of, well, academics, I suppose. And then she'd go, why can't anyone come? Well, there's only a small room. And she's like, well, why isn't there a bigger room? And I'm like, So actually, I've kind of been feeling for quite a long time that some of the kind of practices I do aren't quite good enough in that respect. My mum really likes me, by the way. She's happy. I think in terms of my research, it's very kind of important for me to, I suppose, be asking the questions or kind of thinking about the questions that people actually want. I thought what you said was really important about kind of which symptoms matter and things like that. Because actually we go in with all these sort of suppositions, and actually it might not be the kind of things that people want to be involved in and the kind of things that they want to read. So in that respect, I think it's really important. Also kind of considering that I'm really interested in loneliness. We talk about kind of isolation from other people or isolation from important services, but also people are kind of isolated from the kind of things we do. They don't necessarily feel involved. They aren't involved. So in some ways I see it as a kind of another form of connection.
Excellent. Thank you, Fred. Thank you. I'm going to ask you one last question now. So I'm going to give you a big sheet of paper to scribble on. That's why the felt pens are on the desk. And that's, as we've already said, there are people throughout the centre who can help you with this. but what kind of support right now do you think you're going to need to help you achieve engaged research? So I'd like you to spend 5 minutes just on your tables having a conversation about that, thinking about what kind of support will you need, and scribble your thoughts down on the big piece of paper in lots of different colours.
What support do you need?
Draw, leave messages. But just think for 5 minutes in your groups about what kind of support you think you're going to need.
Let's try it.
I don't feel part. It's all right.
Okay. I was going to say, I was going to type a message to Amy just to say, you can transmit your thoughts through the type. Tell us what you need for support. Oh, sorry, Katrina, I need to click you into the. Oh, sorry. There you go.
Yeah, that's
Draw.
I think all those ways of things, like the normal amount of money that makes it basic. Another really dangerous.
Oh yeah. No, but I mean, it's also how different
then you think that's what it is now. Their email address.
So much richness.
Oh, you come onto this table.
We're all being out.
Oh, that's nice.
We keep it quiet. Yeah, we just say extenuating club project. Yeah, they call it the birthday. Yeah, so that's the Sea of Galilee You just don't even call it the English Channel, Brett. You don't even do
It's possible she would encourage you to say this.
I think we just have a picture of Brett's mum and it's like, what's the point of what you're doing? It's like, a little picture, like, bigger.
I was just going to say, I'm typing as you, so I was going to say,
We're enjoying your enjoyment.
Another minute. Oh, good, you
It's actually really difficult to engage
I hate to stop a good conversation, but I hope very much that you see this as the start of an ongoing conversation for the next few years. But I would just like to maybe get every table just to give one point about the support. I'm going to take these away and look at them. But one thought from this table?
Ethical approval.
Okay, we'll have a conversation about that. What about this table?
We talked about knowing who's in the centre and what links they've got and what they can help with. Because it's great to know all this expertise is here, but we don't know who to go to for, and quite a lot of that happens by chance. So
Okay, so
a way of knowing.
but yes, okay, that's good. Making connections. Yeah, good. Fine. That's a good point. This table, Jessie.
Some examples or guidance of how to make first contact with people, so you can be clear about what you're trying to do without already starting to give direction to those things. I think examples would be really helpful.
Examples, that's good thinking. Good thinking. What about this table?
Failing in public.
Failing in public.
Sharing our
Sharing
failures.
when
things
yes.
go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And something that we've said in the past is that this place is, we're really lucky in our funding, and we are allowed to take those risks. And taking risks means that we might get a few things wrong, but it's important that we share them when we do, that we learn from them. Absolutely.
Yeah, we were saying that as academics, we publish papers and things like that. We see the success stories, and I think a lot of people starting out, they don't see everything that's gone on the surface, but there's rejections. You see someone that's just won a prestigious fellowship, and you don't hear about the 16 jobs they applied for beforehand, and you think that everybody's doing better than you, and and I think just being aware of the difficulties that people have, and sharing some best practice or funny stories or just commiserating, I think makes going through the whole process a lot more.
That's really helpful.
There is a Joseph Rowntree change in action document, which it doesn't quite do what you said, but it does explain how incredibly difficult some of this stuff can be, because I was one of the authors and I refused to write another one saying let's pretend it's all really simple and easy, and that is available, and if not I can send it to Anne and make it available. It's a bit long and boring in places, but it is a bit of a no sort of all hang your washing out in public type thing, because it was just
helpful to us as well.
The British Science Association used to have a database where they used to encourage public engagement, and they stopped doing it today. And I don't know
it's very, my mother, it's very, very
I just wonder whether we could have some regular meetings. It can be informal, where we just come and say, look, I did this last week, and I actually don't think it was the best idea. What do you think my mistake was, and how would you suggest I can do this differently next time? Because it, of course, is never going to be bulletproof, because each public is different, each discussion is different, and if it's you, it's much better than if it's me, maybe, or vice versa. But the point is, if we discuss this, we're not seeing them as failures, we're seeing them as part of the process, and we're learning with each other. So is that what you were going to say?
I think that's part of the culture we want to develop here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I was just going to say, sorry, Anne, I was going to say this at the end, but I think
we're at the end, so that's fine.
In now is, shall we come together in 6 to 8 weeks' time and sort of do this, but as a conversation, and you guys bring where you are, bring your concerns, bring your engagement plans, ideas, and we'll just come together and discuss them?
Can I say that, yes, that sounds really good. And also perhaps then we could sort of brainstorm, given each individual person's situation, how they could sort of get the most out of, so for example, other aspects of engagement that maybe they hadn't thought about, maybe they have the contact but they haven't, So
I think that would be hugely important to get that happening, because that's part of the culture we want to build. As I said at the beginning, this whole place is an experiment in engaged research. And as researchers, we're all setting out on paths. Well, we want to set out on new paths. We want to do new things. Otherwise, why are we here? But we need to learn from each other. So I think we started a conversation today, and I think we need to keep coming back to that conversation and helping each other along the way. So it's 3:30. I promised we would finish at 3:30. Thank you to Rachel and Katrina. Amy has said she's very excited to meet you all, and she's looking forward to meeting some of you. Thanks, Amy.
Oh, and she's laughed many times with us all. So,
Bye, Amy. All right, thanks so much. But don't think you have to run away.
I knew something was
And it's closer to home.
Yeah.
And I think
I think it's about starting. Yeah, you can't just jump in, you know. Actually, there's so much you can fix. You had to
Because that's where you help people
training. We disagree about that. And you can
dedicated their career to thinking.
That's about protecting the participants that collaborate. No,
honestly, I think
That makes sense.
Because we're going to come back, they're going to grow.
And then you'll see Catherine. And so just 20 years behind the that's a question which is I always actually my that's a public health my approach. I think we're there. No.
So there are actually.
No,
let's have a go.
It's okay, don't worry. It's just taking little hacking off.
Maybe like